Should you prepare your child for their interview with the judge? Hi, I'm Alicia Kinchler with Kinchler Law, a family law practice based out of the Philadelphia area. When you have a custody trial or custody hearing before a judge, the judge is likely to want to speak to your child. Now, the age at which they speak to them and the information that they ask of them is going to depend on their age. Also, it's going to depend on their maturity level and their ability to be qualified as a witness. Now, sometimes judges will just want to talk to a child, one, to make sure that they're safe. This is especially the case in maybe where there's been no contact with one parent from the other parent. And sometimes ordering the child to appear in court can be a way for them to effect the transition of custody or exchange of custody from one parent to the other parent. But even children as young as 4 and 5 sometimes will talk to the judge. And again, the judge really isn't looking for them to be able to give testimony or to give a preference as to where they want to be. Sometimes they're just checking in with them. Now, the older your child gets, the more likely it is the judge is going to ask them questions that may be specific to specific events. So if there have been things that were of concern or things that one parent is alleging that is happening at the other parent's house and the child is telling them this, the judge may ask them about those alleged incidents. And again, the older the child gets, the judge may ask them about their preference. Now, the judge may not come right out and say, hey, what do you want the schedule to be between you and your other parent? But the judge may get an assessment as to, do they feel like the current schedule is working? Do they feel like they would prefer, a little bit more time in other parents' house than they're getting right now at the house they're at? So I think it's important for you to kind of understand some of the limitations inside of that interview. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but I'm going to actually link in the show notes to a video that Pennsylvania has put up, just kind of giving some information about how a child interview is conducted. But a couple of other things you should know is that a lot of the times, majority of the time, in a custody case, those interviews are done outside of the presence of the parent. And this is generally to make a child feel more comfortable in speaking the truth. But generally, we know that testimony of children usually is done what we call in camera, which is outside of the witness of other people. Generally, attorneys are still allowed to be present. And in situations where a party is self-represented, they would be acting as their own attorney. Now, the judge will usually ask, do you waive your appearance or your right to be in this part of the hearing? And a lot of the times, most attorneys will, particularly if they know the judge and they're comfortable with the way that the judge will speak to the child, if they are comfortable with the judge's ability to be able to ask questions and get information about the specific things that need information gathered on. So again, those alleged incidents or specific situations that may have happened involving the child, then a lot of the times attorneys are going to go ahead and waive their right to be present during the questioning of the child. Some attorneys won't do it. Some judges won't even ask you. They allow you to be present. There's one particular judge in Philadelphia I know right off the bat is going to basically expect attorneys to be in the courtroom when they're interviewing the children. And they will usually talk to the child first and then give you the opportunity to speak to the child or ask questions of the child. So generally what happens after the interview, the judge may come back out and just say some very general things about, the child. Hey, you have a great child, or your child is very sad. But generally they're not giving you specifics as to what was said, and often at times that testimony is sealed. A lot of the times parents will ask questions like, well, what should I tell my child about the interview, about what's going to happen? And as parents, we want to protect our children and keep them from being anxious. We want to give them an idea what to expect. So one thing that you should do is, if you have the opportunity to ask the judge ahead of time, is to ask the judge, what exactly should you tell your child about what's going to happen? And I think this was even more so the case in situations where you were bringing the child to the courthouse. It's this big, sometimes scary looking building. They have no idea what's going on. Generally, if you're doing kind of what you're supposed to, you're not really talking about the custody proceedings with the child. So this may all be brand new to them. So explaining, hey, this is where we're going, is going to take a little bit of the anxiety off and take some of that shock off of them. So some judges will say, look, you can tell the judge they're coming to the court. They're going to meet with me. I'm nice. I'm going to, just talk to them a little bit about how things are going, what they want to be when they grow up, things like that, just to make them comfortable. And I will tell you, generally, that's what judges do. They kind of introduce themselves, they build a rapport, and then they start to ask some questions, and they kind of, sprinkle it in with other questions to kind of get the child to open up and talk to them a little bit more. But generally, again, you want to ask the judge what is appropriate for me to tell them. And again, usually some information about where you're going, that the judge is generally a good person who's going to just talk to them. They're not mean. They're not in trouble in any way. That the judge is not going to tell them generally what they say to the judge. That they can kind of be there can be some confidence built there. So those are some ideas about what you can say to your child. Again, getting the permission of the judge or speaking with your attorney about what's appropriate. Because on the other side of that is the potential to run into coaching. And what you don't want to do or have your child seem like you're doing is giving them the answer, saying, hey, if the judge asks you this, then you should say that. You don't ever want to do it. Tell them they should tell the truth and they should be honest. And if they don't know, they can say they don't know. But they should always be honest and tell the truth to the judge, and they don't have anything to worry about. But in a situation where a judge may feel like the child was coached, can have very bad bearing on your case, especially if it was a coaching with something very specific to the case that might help or hurt one of the parties, the outcome of the case. So just be very careful in the way that you conduct yourself in that manner. Generally, when you are going to court in person, you want to make sure that someone else is there. Hopefully that other person can bring the child in so they're not sitting in the courthouse the entire proceeding waiting to get called in for just a few minutes. Have someone that can bring them in and take them back out so that you can finish focusing on that and someone can focus on them. Now that we're doing them by Zoom, a lot of times the judge will ask that the child remain in a room with a door that's closed. No one should be lurking around. Some judges will even, depending on the age of the child and what else is going on in the house, ask that that person leave the house. So and some judges will make sure that they actually are contacting the child on their own separate individual devices. Again, just to make sure that there is confidentiality at play here, to make sure that the child feels comfortable, to try to prevent any one parent from unduly influencing the testimony of that child, and to make sure that the other party feels that it's not being unduly influenced. All right, so that's a longer conversation than I initially intended, to kind of talk a little bit about that child interview, because it does play a role definitely in Pennsylvania with the 16 factors when we talk about child preferences, but also the ability of your child to be a witness to some of the issues that might have come up that might be a big part of the factoring analysis of those custody factors. All right, I hope you found this video helpful. Make sure that you hit subscribe and turn on the notification button so that you get a notification whenever we drop a new video. You can contact my office and speak to an attorney at KinchlerLaw.com below, and I'll also put the telephone number in the show notes. You always want to speak to an attorney licensed in your area about the facts specific to your case. All right, until next time, take care.